Alright, so this is it. This is part 2 of chapter 12 of a book that seems like has gone on forever for being 229 pages. But let's finish it. Let's do it. This is it. No more wolf SWAT teams after this. Part 2. Gage had been pissed as hell to find out Hardy wasn't home. He'd really wanted to serve the man the warrants personally, but the search of the South Lake residence had still gone well. Not only had they connected Hardy to the men who'd come after him and Mackenzie, but they'd also gone enough to put the guy away for years on racketeering charges, tax evasion, money laundering, illegal drugs, just to name a few. So here's a guy who's been committing crimes forever and whatever. Gage couldn't believe Hardy had been so sloppy as to keep records of all his dealings. It wasn't like he didn't think the cops would dare come after him. He was still worried no one had seen Hardy yet, though. Gage was just about to check to see if the deputy chief had heard anything when his cell phone rang. Dixon. Hardy's men grabbed Mac, Brooks said simply. Gage's heart stopped. What? When? About 10 minutes ago. The bastard speed of Zach to lure Mac to the hospital. We chased them for a couple of miles, but they still got away. Shit. I'm on my way. Where are you? After Brooks gave him the location, Gage shoved his phone in his pocket, then shouted for Delancey and Lowry to get to the vehicle. He saw Mason glance his way. Gage pretended not to see him. They didn't need SWAT on the scene now anyway. Brooks had obviously alerted the whole team, because there were several SWAT SUVs parked along the side of the road where the senior corporal had set to meet him. The road had been blocked off around what looked like a traffic accident. A dark sedan was lying in the ditch where the driver's door was smashed in and windows missing. Bullet holes riddled the car, and there were 4 dead bodies lying in the grass, automatic weapons alongside them. Hundreds of shell casings were scattered around the area. Gage's whole pack were clustered around the first SUV in the line. Well, not all of them. Becker and Xander were missing. Cooper was sitting on the hood of the car with his shirt off, a stoic look on his face, while Trevino dug a bullet out of his shoulder. The team medic dropped it to the asphalt to join the others that he'd already taken out. Shit, there were a lot of bloody bullets lying there. Brooks turned. There was a dark purple and black bruise running down the man's neck and into his collar that probably stretched across his shoulder and chest. It looked like he'd been hit by a freaking car. I think he was. Any idea where they took Mackenzie? We don't know for sure. All we know is that she was taken by Roscoe Patterson. Brooks briefly outlined the call Mac had gotten from the hospital, the ambush they'd walked right into, and the subsequent chase. You rammed a car off the road? Gage asked. Werewolves are strong, and Brooks was stronger than most, but tackling a car? That was extreme. Yeah, I thought it was the car Mac was in. His jaw tightened. It wasn't until I started yanking people out that I realized I'd hit the wrong one. That's when I ripped the door off the other car, but one of Hardy's thugs got in the way, Cooper said. They sped off before I could pull Mac out. I tried to keep up with him, but I couldn't. Sorry, boss. Why does that seem so improbable? They're werewolves. I would expect them to be able to run a car off the road. Gage appreciated the effort they'd gone to get her back. He knew there was nothing more they could have done, and no one here has any idea where the car was heading. No one who's alive, Cooper said. We're hoping Becker gets lucky. Gage frowned. Where's Becker? Trying to get in to talk to Zach, Brooks answered. According to the nurse at the hospital, a couple of tourists brought Zach in. We assume those tourists were actually some of Hardy's men, and that Zach might have overheard something, either while they were beating the hell out of him or while they were taking him to the hospital to be bait. Gage was unsure what they would expect out of Zach. The guy didn't exactly seem like a kind of man who would pay attention to details while in the middle of an ass-whooping. And Xander? Well, that's kind of fucked up. I like Zach. He's the only character in this goddamn book I like. He's there to make sure the doctors don't try to drag Becker in for surgery, Cooper supplied. He got hit a few times, too. Not as many times as I was, but I think that's because he was using me as a shield. There wasn't much they could do until Xander and Becker got some information, but that didn't mean they couldn't search the car and the men who had been in it. Maybe they'd get lucky. Wow, doing police work. Gage was digging through some suitcases in the trunk of the sedan when the 3 police cruisers and an unmarked car pulled up beside them. He spotted Deputy Chief Mason Salt and Pepper Hair in the front seat. Mike came over to stand next to Gage as Mason got out of the car. Shit, this was all he needed. Mason's jaw was tight as he took in the bodies on the ground, the automatic weapons, and the bullet holes in the car. His eyes narrowed when he saw Cooper sitting on the hood of the SUV with blood covering half his chest and a SWAT medic leaning over him with a pair of forceps. What the hell is going on here? He demanded, his gaze snapping to Gage and Mike. First I find out there's a shootout in front of Mercy General involving 3 of my SWAT officers. Then I learn you've ordered your entire team here. Have you lost your mind, Sergeant? Mason walked over and looked down at the first body he came to. A body that didn't have any obvious bullet wounds but clearly been killed in an extremely brutal fashion. He made a face and turned to Gage again. As if that isn't enough, I get a call on the way here that one of Hardy's enforcers is dead in a ditch about a mile up the road. The patrolman said that it looked like someone threw the man out of a moving vehicle. What's left of him, anyway. They still haven't found his arm. The deputy chief strode over to Gage. Maybe you can explain it to me. Deputy chief is really stupid. Gage wasn't going to pull any punches with his superior. He didn't have time, and neither did Mackenzie. Hardy's men abducted Mackenzie Stone about 40 minutes ago and have taken her to who the hell knows where. My guess is they're delivering her to Hardy as we sit on our thumbs. Mason looked at him sharply. The reporter? What would Hardy want with her? Payback, Gage said simply. I took away someone who was important to him, so he wants to take away someone who's important to me. Mason's brows rose. You and Stone? He swore under his breath. Fuck, you should have told me. You don't have a clue where she was taken? He did just fucking tell you. Gage shook his head. Not yet, but I hope to know soon. Mason regarded him thoughtfully. What do you plan to do once you figure out where Hardy took her? Gage didn't hesitate. I'm going to get her back. By yourself? The boss asked dryly, without telling anyone else in the department. Gage didn't answer. He didn't give a shit about proper police procedure in a case like this. There was nothing that'd keep him from going after Mackenzie. Mason sighed. I'll get a bolo out on the Stone. Maybe we'll get lucky and someone saw where they took her. Then I'll get a team out here to take care of this mess. The deputy chief walked away, leaving Gage to wonder if the man was really going to look the other way on something like this. Then his boss stopped and turned back to glare at him. And get Cooper to the hospital before he bleeds to death. Gage nodded as the deputy chief reached in the car for a radio. A few minutes later, Xander called. Tell me you talked to Zach, Gage said as he put the phone on speaker. We did, Xander replied. Hardy's men really beat the shit out of him. Probably figured he'd die from it, but he's tougher than he looks. The doctors didn't think he'd even come to for a couple of days, but he was already awake and shouting to talk to someone from the SWAT team when we walked in. Does he know where Hardy's men took Mackenzie? Maybe. After kicking in his door and doing a number on him, they tossed him in the trunk of their car for the drive to the hospital. Through the back seat, he heard them talking about a private hangar where Hardy keeps a jet. Zach thinks that's where they took Mac, so Hardy can kill her before he leaves the country. The last part made Gage flinch, but he forced the image aside. He had to stay focused on the fact that he was going to get Mackenzie back safely. Zach's information wasn't as concrete and as definitive as he would have preferred, but it was the best intel he was going to get at this point. Okay, I'm heading to the airport, he said. Is Becker in good enough shape to do that computer thing he does and figure out where Hardy keeps his plane? There has to be some record of it somewhere that gives us a clue where the hangar is. Do the computer thing he does? I mean, really? Are you fucking kidding me? Is that a given? Like, does every single cop thing have to have, like, the boss cop who has no idea how technology works? Don't worry, Sarge, Becker's voice came on the line. I'm already on it. If it's a private hangar, it'll be on the north side of the airport. Riggs and I will meet you outside the airport on the expressway. I'll have something specific before you get there. Gage hadn't been asking to join them. Hadn't asked anyone to join him, but he appreciated it. But he appreciated it anyway. Gage, Xander's voice came back on. You know Hardy is bound to have a lot of his men around the place. Who else is going in with us? Gage didn't answer. He turned to look around the blocked section of the highway and was surprised to see that his pack had stopped digging for clues and come to stand in front of him, their faces set and determined. His gaze lingered on Brooks and Cooper, still torn and bloody from their last encounter with Hardy's men. Their faces were no less determined than the others. He couldn't ask any of them to do this with him. Hardy was going to have an army of thugs around him, and whether Mason looked the other way or not, this operation wasn't likely to go down well with internal affairs and the politicians down at the police headquarters. They were going to figure out that Gage had broken every rule in the book because his girlfriend was involved. He didn't care what they did to him, but if any of his men went in there with them, they'd be risking their futures in the department as well. He couldn't ask them to do that. Oh, boo-hoo, they're going to go with you anyway. But he looked at each of their faces and realized he didn't have to ask them. We're all going, he told Xander. Alright, so that was the end of Chapter 12. I'm going to do Chapter 13 in a separate video so it doesn't get too long, because who the fuck wants to sit here and listen to this book for an hour? So see you in the next one.